You're listening to episode 22 of the Confident Rider podcast with Jane Pike. I'm excited for you to listen into my conversation with Katy Negranti today, because not only is she one of my favourite people and someone who I'm constantly deferring to for training advice, but she is a horsewoman and trainer that I have so much respect for and really believe we can learn a lot from. In addition to helping riders like myself, Katy works with what we might typically describe as problem horses. Horses who've been deemed dangerous or undergone some kind of traumatic event or circumstance, and she moves them towards being productive members of society. What I love about Katy is her compassion, her understanding of the principles of training, and her attention to the basics. And we decided to dedicate this episode to just that. So here it is for you today, my conversation with Katy about the ABCs of horse training. I am here today with the fabulous, legendary even, Katy Negranti, who some of you will be familiar with, but for those of you who aren't, Katy is a horse trainer from Morro Bay in California. We also adventured together to the World Equestrian Games last year, and we're just talking about where exactly we would have been this time last year. Do you know exactly where that is, Katy?
I think we were going through Missouri where there was places to stop to get brownies. Do you remember that?
Very specific. I like your memory. Yes. I thought you were going to say that we were choosing what properties we would buy along the way.
Yeah, you were too. I don't think we were in Kentucky yet. I think we were going to Missouri, and there was interesting business signs on the way.
There were. Oh, do I remember that? What Katy is referring to are some signs which, when taken out of context of where it is they are and placed in the humorous context of different cultures, make you laugh quite significantly. They were hilarious. They were so funny. That's a whole nother episode in and of itself. I was going to say that I thought we were in New Mexico, but was that earlier on in the piece?
No, that would have been the second day, because we did California to Arizona. Did we go to Texas the second day?
Well, we went through Texas enough for me to buy a mug that has Texas on it. And I got very excited about my Texas experience, only to discover that we were there for like half an hour. So I'm pretty impressed with that. Pretty impressed with that purchase, to be honest.
Yeah, we went to Texas. We made it to Texas the second night. The third night we made it to Missouri, and then the fourth night we ended up in Kentucky.
I think that Texas was around the last time my bank cards worked.
Yes, I forgot about that.
From that moment forward, my bank decided that no one was hopping states that fast usually and blocked all my cards, despite me notifying them that I would be crossing the country. So for those of you who have literally no idea what we're talking about, Katy and Rachel and I transported Warwick and Robin's horses from California right across country to North Carolina for the World Equestrian Games. And we had the best time road tripping. I was a little bit ignorant, I would like to say, at the start, because I would have brought a whole bag full of food with me had I only realised we would be eating at truck stops for that entire journey. But that was a patient in and of itself. That was exciting. And that first place we stopped, where it was really, really hot, I think we were still in California at that point. And that was my first coffee machine experience, where I pressed a half and half button thinking that what was going to happen was a latte. I thought that a half and half would be half milk, half coffee. That seems to me like a fairly reasonable assessment. And as I continued to press the button, what appeared to come out was consistently very cold, quite creamy milk. And so I asked the guy behind the counter, is there going to be coffee that comes out of this? And he's like, that's half and half, ma'am. And I'm like, oh. Actually, just having said that, I can notice as well that my American accent has slipped. But I'm pretty sure I
Yes.
was able to get back. Yeah, I was on the spot, like I didn't expect to be able to do that right then. So that was another thing that I practiced on my trip. I practiced my American accent. After Rachel and I had some difficulty ordering a bottle of water, and we had to repeat water in several different accents before pointing vigorously at what it was that we wanted. Oh, but it was super fun. Super fun. That's one thing about Facebook memories as well. They're popping up all over the place.
Yes, and they will continue for the next few weeks.
Katy, incidentally, has become my WEG wife. I anointed. I'm not sure if I actually forced you into that position or whether it was consensual. But I do refer to her as my WEG wife.
It was an arranged marriage.
It was an arranged marriage. I think it worked really well. It used to work really well. Yeah.
You survived.
I not only survived, but I thrived. We spent how long together? How many days?
I think it was almost 3 weeks.
It was, huh? 24/7.
Yeah, 24/7 for 3 weeks, and I didn't kill you, and that was good.
That is the biggest testimonial I've ever received. Thank you, Katy. We complement each other in so many ways. I actually have loads of selfies of me and Katy in various different places. And most of them I'm grinning broadly, and most of them Katy is grimacing. So that kind of like sums up our time together. Fun, super fun. So the purpose of us getting together today, apart from reminiscing about our whole WEG adventure, was or is to talk about the ABCs of horse training, which is fundamentally why paying attention to the basics is important. And I know this is a strong thread that goes through all of your courses and methodologies that you use when working together with horses. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that means to you and how it applies in your training?
So I basically got into the whole horsemanship thing probably 15, maybe almost 20 years ago. I had a horse that she was barn sour. She wouldn't walk down the trail. She would not go over jumps. She did all these sorts of behaviors that, like I see now, is pretty easy stuff to manage. Mm-hmm. But it took me down the rabbit hole of the whole horsemanship thing and learning how to work with horses better. And the ABC thing came about, I think it'll be almost 5 years now, when I met Warwick. So I met Warwick after I had a terrible experience at a clinic with a clinician that told me to fix my horse's separation anxiety by whacking her over the head with the end of the rein. So every time she got within, did I ever tell you that?
You did tell me this, but I continue to have a shocked reaction every time I hear it.
Yeah. And it, like a famous guy too, and it was quite impressive that you could get away with that in public. So if my horse came within 5 feet of another horse, he had me whack her between the ears with the rein, and then she'd run off, and we were bolting and ducking and diving all around the arena. But it, I guess it got her to not want to be around other horses. And I left that clinic and said, I'm never going back again. Emailed Warwick and said, here's my situation, here's what happened. And he says, oh, I'm free next week, come over.
Mm-hmm. And that's Warwick Schiller that you're referring to, for people that don't know. So just to backtrack, when you were at the clinic and that was happening, how did that feel? Like, what was your reaction at the time, or was it just confusion?
It was, the guy knew me. He knew I could ride. And to me, it felt like I was being used to create like a show. Mm-hmm. And it was really frustrating. And it actually almost got me kicked off premises, because that night some people posted on my Facebook wall. They're like, man, you can sure ride. That was quite a day. They kind of went off into it. And I didn't say anything. But the next morning, the people running the clinic pulled me aside and said, you need to delete your stuff because we don't need bad publicity. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening to me. Mm-hmm. And I finished out the day because it was only, it was the last day of it. And then I said, never again. This isn't what I want. It doesn't have to be I don't think things need to be this hard. When I met Warwick, I think it was 2 weeks later, was when I finally met up with Warwick. And basically that was the start of principles versus method thinking. Was, I got really good at this particular person's method. Mm-hmm. But when I'd hit a wall, there wasn't a video on how to fix it. Like there wasn't a method
thought process
on how to fix the thing that I was trying to fix. And that was the big thing working with Warwick. And that was where I appreciate him so much, is that he's like, once you know what the principles are, you can make your own method. And with that little horse that I took to him, she was, the whole thing about balance, balancing them mentally as well as physically, like getting them to do the things that you want them to do, but then also having them be okay with the things that you want them to do. And this horse was very obedient, and she would do anything I asked, but she was worried about everything I asked her to do. And that was something that through just from where I was at the time with different horses, I was finding the same trend. So it was like I was hitting a wall and I didn't know how to fix it, and working with, and so going down that path was huge. And the biggest thing I learned was, that concept that I call the ABCs now, is with that little horse I took to work at first, I'd go out and I would work on the thing that I was thinking I just needed to work on. So I didn't have a process every day. I had enough of a process to get on and go, but not enough of a process to check, like, is this thing that we did yesterday, how is that? And then how is this? And then how is this? And then how is this? I would work on something for 5 minutes, and then I'd work on something else for 5 minutes, and I'd work on something else for 5 minutes. So I wasn't working on something until it was good. I was working on something out of method wise, where you work on this for 5 times on each side before you move on. There wasn't a working on it until it's understood.
In everything that you've mentioned there as well, that's such a common mindset to come from, where people identify with a specific problem, and it might be that my horse spooks, or he's reactive out on the trail, or he responds in this way, and the fixation on doing that thing happens at the expense of actually understanding the underlying motivations as to why that behavior is occurring. So it's like we're studying things from the wrong end. You're looking at this result that you're wanting to create without examining the processes that need to occur, and how the horse needs to be okay with several different things in order for that piece of the puzzle to fall into place.
Yeah, exactly. So the whole idea with the ABCs is what I tell people initially. The process doesn't look like much. When you're doing groundwork or you're doing the beginning parts of the riding, it doesn't look like anything. You're not ever going to use it for anything. It's not discipline specific. It looks meaningless. It looks like, how is that going to benefit me? And what I found it does is it just starts a conversation with a horse. It starts the communication process with a horse, where you work on something that's simple. It may not be easy, but it's simple, it's straightforward, and you start to build a connection. You start to build a way to communicate with that horse that then you can build from there. That's probably the hardest part, is taking things that you see that aren't going to actually be the thing that you want to do. With my horses, I want to be able to do a little bit of the reining, or I want to be able to do some of the ranch work, or I want to be able to go do Western dressage or cowboy dressage. And the stuff that I do day to day looks nothing like any of it. It was hard for a long time to do it that way, because I felt like I wasn't going to get there. If I'm not working on, stops and turns and lead changes and teaching my horse how to be roped off of, I'm never going to get there. And what I found was, I call it the hockey stick effect, and I think it's actually an actual term somewhere, but the hockey stick effect is the base of a hockey stick is kind of a slow, gradual angle, and if you think of on a graph, your training is slow. It doesn't really spike anywhere. It's like a slow but steady sort of thing. And then it reaches the corner of the hockey stick and it shoots up. And I have found that so many times on horses now, where in the beginning, it's, however long it takes to get to that point. But it's you spend so much time doing stuff that's I'm never going to get to my goal. I'm never going to be able to do what I want to do.
And then
one day you're yeah. And then one day you're holy cow, where did this come from?
Yeah.
Now we're doing the stuff that I haven't even taught you how to do this stuff. How did you know how to do this? And it just comes from having all of these little things really, really good. And what I found in the process was the horses weren't getting worried about it. And so the problems that I had before, thinking about methods versus principles, the problems that I had before were going away. the horses were no longer anxious. They were no longer dull and lazy. The spookiness went away. The separation anxiety wasn't there, and at the time I wanted to know how to fix separation anxiety. I wanted to know how to fix spooking. And what I found was it's not something you can fix. It's a byproduct of your daily work and the way you handle the horses day in, day out. It's not something that you can go in and push a button and say, fix it, make it go away.
Yeah, you're creating the conditions of confidence or for confidence within the processes that you're following. And I think that consistent negotiation of the threshold that they're happy with and knowing when to push through that and when to drop back, and that balance between activity and stillness is something that I've really embraced and noticed the difference in. And now I actually, it's so easy to see how anxiety is really the top player in so many issues that horses are experiencing, anxiety or misunderstanding. I think if we could rule those two things out, and maybe I'll throw a third one in there and say like body issues or, biomechanical issues, those three things, if they are dealt with, then I think that the playing field is so much more harmonious for both us and for them.
Yeah. And I see it a lot, and I'm sure you see it a lot too, with riders who are insecure or fearful or anxious. It stems from either a lack of knowledge, like they feel like they don't have control over what happens, or they might be physically limited. So they feel like if something does happen, I can't control what happens because I'm physically limited. Like those two things are huge. And it's the same in the horses. If the horses are physically compromised, if they're in pain or they're sick, they tend to be anxious.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a whole different worldview to operate from. Basically, you can't, when you're in that, and I don't really want to say traditional zone, but it is a traditional zone, and it's one that I've been a part of as well. So I'm not saying that, I came into this whole horsing experience enlightened in any way. Like I've definitely gone through the motions of working with different schools of thought. And now that I am following the same principles and methodologies that you're referring to, I really don't even know how I did half of what I did before or how I got away with some stuff. I'm like, wow, my horses were really forgiving, or they were, so great to put up with what it was I was doing then, and it's not that it was coming from an ill-intentioned place. It was coming from an ignorant place, basically, ignorant of their thought processes and feelings, and making that shift as well to being or searching out partnership and connection, as opposed to just, I want to ride to create this result.
And something that changed quite dramatically too, I don't remember when it was, maybe three and a half years ago. So again, bringing up Warwick, but Warwick and I were at a clinic in Pomona, California, and Mary Kitzmiller was there, and we cornered her and we're like, hey, so what's this clicker training stuff? We both were very skeptical about it, and we had our opinions, like it's something that, only crazy cat ladies do. That was our perception. And that was something, like, I'm kind of embarrassed to say it that way, but that was our perception based on the circle of people that we were around, that both of us had been around. And we got to talking to her, and then we watched some of what she was doing, and we both looked at each other and we're like, this is really good stuff. And after that expo, I ended up taking Bundy, his Warwick's horse, home with me, because he was going to be gone doing something. And I said, would you be okay if I experimented with this while you're gone? And he basically said, sure, just don't screw my horse up. And I was like, oh God, no pressure.
Sit, Bundy, sit.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh, I got more stories on that. And the clicker training was a whole, like, I went way down into a rabbit hole on that. And it wasn't so much the positive reinforcement or the clicking and the treating and it wasn't quite the superficial. It was the stuff I learned on the much deeper level, like how, with the clicker training, you don't make anything happen. When you're learning how to shape behavior, you can't physically make the horse do what you want it to do. And so it was a very powerful lesson on learning how to watch and observe and learn how to read what the horse was going to do before they did it, so that you could time it just right so the horse understood what you wanted him to do. And teaching for some reason I gravitate to tricks when I learn how to do something with a horse or I'm trying to connect with a horse. Tricks for me, I don't know why, but it's like, I'll just teach you something cool. Like, let's see if we can figure out something cool. And in the process of doing that, I had to figure out, how do I break this down to get this horse to understand? And it was very much like trial and error. My timing was too early. It was too late. I was trying to ask for too much. Through the work, it was like, oh my gosh, this is going to make the other stuff I do so much easier because I'm learning to see things on a whole different level. Like you start to see the little things, and you start to really understand, where that my ABC thing came from, was you start to really see how many steps there really is to teaching something cool, even if it's something simple, but teaching something cool. And that was very powerful. And I kind of kept it to myself. I showed like a couple of cool tricks, but I kind of kept it to myself because of the, kind of the stigma behind clicker training and positive reinforcement. There was people will tend to laugh at you when you do it because there's a misconception that you're bribing the horse to do things, and or it's just
them
for tricks.
Laugh, I say.
Yeah. Oh, no kidding, man.
The thing with tricks as well, sorry, again, talking over you in my enthusiasm for this topic, but I think the thing with tricks is that it's very easy to create a false association about the value behind teaching something like that. But what I have noticed in observing you training those types of behaviors and having a little bit of a play with it myself is that it's really useful for blowing apart any conditioned behaviors that cause horses and us to lock into a certain way of going about things.
Yeah.
So if you blow apart that paradigm and you aren't working with associations that they might be typically channeled into that cause them to default to being a certain way. Do you know what I mean? So it's really useful, I think, for reassociating, not only in terms of relationship, but actually creating that sense of curiosity again and reestablishing new parameters that allow you to present as a different way of going about things than they might have experienced previously.
So I do a lot of problem horse rehab. For some reason, I attract the hard ones, the bucking, the rearing, the bolting. And that's something I have found, is that you can't help a horse with history by going about it the same way that the last guy did. And so and I think that's kind of where I have been forced to evolve. Like if I want to help a horse, I need to figure out how to get there. And I can't do it the way they did it. So a lot of times it's easy because, most times people they don't do what I do. So it's pretty easy to switch over. So you can still use your like what I normally do every day. I can still use that kind of work and it works. For other cases that people have tried doing it my way and have made enough mistakes to kind of cause problems, I've had to learn how to go. You have to just kind of keep reinventing the wheel, so to speak, to get there. That has been probably the biggest thing is figuring out how to go about things a little different than somebody else did in order to get where you need to go. Clicker training is one of those, horses that are shut down, or they're hyper reactive, or they're, they have trauma, they have baggage. You start working with them in a completely different way than they've ever been worked with. And instead of using release of pressure to reward, you're actually giving them something they want. And it changes the game. Like they go from being, oh, you're not going to train on me. And it becomes more like fun. And you train on them and they don't realize you're training on them. And then as you kind of develop that relationship, you start going back to kind of the normal way of pressure and release and teaching them the things that they need to know. And you can get in there because that you've developed a different relationship with that horse where he doesn't see you like the last guy, like you saw the last guy. So it's really it's figuring out how to connect with horses that are difficult. And then when you learn to connect with horses that are difficult, you get the average ones and you go, holy cow, this is like so cool because it works so much quicker and it's so much easier on a horse that doesn't have any problems. You can teach a clean slate so much quicker. So
that undoing process is definitely a much more challenging one than starting with a fresh palate.
For sure. Yeah, I have one right now that a friend of mine are basically partnering on him. She rescued him from this lady who was going to euthanize him. She was going to euthanize him because she couldn't take care of For one, she couldn't take care of his medical needs. He had a broken, rotten tooth, and the multiple vets told her that the surgery was life-threatening because it was something about his sinus cavity, like it would do something bad. And so it was kind of a life or death sort of thing. It was like, if he did the surgery, he could die. But then again, if she wanted to keep him, she was also going to put him down because he was dangerous because of it.
Yeah.
So my friend saved him, and she says, well, if he dies during the surgery, there's not much we can do anyway. But if he lives, we're going to give him a chance. You're going to give him a shot. And it was interesting in the beginning, once he was kind of healthy again, I tried kind of doing my normal thing. And it was working, but it wasn't quite the way I wanted it to work. And so I started just doing some clicker stuff with him. And I initially, did the whole thing where he knows what the click means. He was starting to offer behaviors, just little things. And I turned it into getting him to lay down. Mm-hmm. And the first day, it took an hour to get him to even think about rolling in the sand. Mm-hmm. Like he was going, I'm not laying down. I don't trust you. And within a week of doing it, I'd get like 3, 4, 5 lay downs in a session and put him away. And it got to where I could get 5 lay downs in 5 minutes. And he's like, I love this game, and when I'd go to get him, he's like, I want to come out. And here I am training this horse to do something, basically stupid, like getting him to lay down and sit up is where we're at yesterday. Mm-hmm. Basically getting this horse to do something that is meaningless in the grand scheme of things. And here he is letting me train on him, and he doesn't know it. And I know, there was some criticism from the old owner. She messaged me and she was furious that I was insulting her, and I wasn't. And she said, well, you just don't see his real problems. His real problems are he's buddy sour. He's got separation anxiety. He ran me over. He broke my foot. He, bucked the trainer's assistant off. He did all of these bad things. And she goes, you're not showing any of that. You're just teaching him tricks. And that's not the real problem. And it was something so important to bring up because the real problem is that anxiety, that insecurity. And a lot of it came from pain. Like he was, a broken, rotten tooth. I think most of us would want to kill somebody if we lived with that physical pain. When you get rid of the physical pain, then you're just dealing with the emotional trauma from whatever people tried to do to him to make him behave. Mm-hmm. And it's not about fixing anxiety. You can't fix anxiety. The only thing you can do is help somebody build their confidence, give them the tools to help them, overcome their anxiety, or help them find a way that they can, if they're physically limited, how can they do the things that they want to do without feeling insecure that they can't do it. And
like we referred to earlier, it is a huge but not difficult paradigm shift to make from viewing the problems as the problem as opposed to actually understanding the underlying reasons as to why that's occurring. And I guess if we were to even think of it in very black and white terms, like to go from, being exposed to the trainer that you did and saying like, this just isn't the way that I want to be working with horses, that in and of itself is although it seems kind of horrifying at the time, a really useful moment to put down the tools and say, right, how are we going to do this in a different way? But it requires looking at yourself. You have to actually be self-responsible and take some initiative for how it is you want to approach things. And that can be if we're fixed to a certain way of going about things, or we've hardened our heart to different approaches. For some people, that's a really tough ask.
Yeah. And it really, kind of shifting gears into, it doesn't have to be this hard when all the personal growth needed to happen, because, I've struggled with anxiety and depression and panic attacks since I was 18, 19 that I remember. They're debilitating. When if you've ever had a panic attack, it's something nobody can talk you out of it, and nobody can say, just calm down, you're going to be okay. Like those are,
you're in a really primal place when you're in a panic attack place. Yeah.
And if anything, the situation you're in when you experience it becomes a traumatizing place. Like I've developed trauma to being a passenger in a car, and there nothing bad ever happened to me. It was just, I got a panic attack one time being a passenger in a car for whatever reason. It wasn't like a rational reason. There was nothing physically hurt me. but it was an experience that then had me relate it to every other experience after that. And it took me a long time to like undo it. And it was a lot of practice and a lot of, coping different techniques that I had to learn to work with stuff like that. But I really started to have a lot more understanding, a lot more empathy for the horses that would experience the same thing. So when horses bolt or they buck or they go into a fear-based place, you go, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I put you there. Or I'm so sorry you feel that way. Let me help you kind of not feel the need to go there. And in the process of helping the horses, I really had to work on myself, because if I can't go there, like if I can't be as relaxed as I need to be, that horse is never going to get there either. And so it's very much having to work on myself more than the horses. And when I see something in the horses that isn't working, I have to look at myself and go, okay, I'm not doing this. This isn't working because it has something to do with me. And when I start to kind of shift my approach, I shift my thought process, I shift something, then you see the result. So, it all comes back to the whole ABC thing. Yeah. One more little story that like happened today and yesterday. But I started working with a new trainer to kind of learn a different sport. And I went and had a lesson with her like 2 or 3 weeks ago. And we started working on some stuff, and I was really excited. And I came home and I started working on it. Well, I wasn't being mindful of what I was teaching. And my horse was doing some really cool stuff. She was getting nice and responsive and doing some stuff. And I lost some confidence in her. I lost some of the relaxed part of her. She couldn't just cruise around anymore. She was worried about, what are you going to have me do? And it wasn't that I was being mean and nasty to her. I wasn't working on the balance between getting her responsive and then letting her kind of chill out and relax. Yeah. I was like, okay, she told me I need to work on this, this, and this. And so that's what I'm going to work on. Yeah. And then yesterday it hit the fan. I had been where I could get on her and I could pony my yearling colt and walk up the hill and check the cows and I did it on her just last week, and it wasn't a big deal. And I went to go do that yesterday and I couldn't make it up the hill. She kept spinning around. She was trying to rear up. She was trying to run sideways. And then my colt was like, I'm not going up there either. I don't think she's a suitable babysitter for me right now. No, and that was exactly what he was trying to say too. And I just went, and it's the mistakes that we have to make in order to remind ourselves that we can't get there faster just because we want to get there faster. Yeah. I was trying to I overtrained on her simply because it's new and exciting. And I want to, show my new trainer how, I was so enthusiastic, and my poor horse was like, I don't know what's going on. I want to go home. So right there, I took my horse that last week did not have barn sourness issues to just a couple of sessions of overtraining that now I had barn sour issues. Yeah. And today I went back to our ABCs stuff, and I went, okay, we're working, we worked through some really simple, basic things. I got done, and she's like, hey, let's go up the hill. I want to go check the cows. Nice. Completely different shift in her mindset, just going back to what she knew and going back to what she knew. And she's like, oh, everything's okay. That for me was huge. Like, to be able to do that. Yeah. I think that it highlights as well how it's a constant conversation that we need to be having, and that reinforcing the basics is something that we never graduate out of. It always comes back to reestablishing that whenever we have a problem. The other thing that I remind myself of constantly, and I think potentially a few years ago this might have been something that depressed me, but now I actually find it liberating, is to think that I, for the most part, am in charge of my horse's reality. And if I consider myself to be a causative agent in that approach, then whatever comes up, I actually have some power to influence, to say, like, how is it that I can get us towards a better feeling place? Or he's obviously feeling upset. How is it that I can adjust myself and how it is that I'm presenting to be that place of peace, And I think that
a while back, I used to perhaps get invested in the problem and not have that autonomy between what it was they were presenting and how it was I felt in response to that. And now what I can do is separate myself out, and thanks to you and a few other people, say, I can see my horse is feeling this way. Like, is that something that I'm doing? How is it that we can get to a better place as a consequence of this? And it's such a liberating mindset to be operating from.
Yes. The other important part is not feeling defeated if you have to go back.
Yeah.
Like, I know so many people that go, basically I hit a brick wall and I have to go back and, I'm so disappointed in myself.
What a failure.
And I'm a failure. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. And that's something that now when that happens to me, like yesterday when my horse was a complete, oh my gosh, and a friend of mine was here and I'm like, this is not how things normally are. Like, please don't judge what I'm doing. And she goes, I totally get it. When things like that happen, instead of going, oh my gosh, I'm so stupid, I'm not good at this, I'm a failure for my horse getting to that point, I go, okay, this is the perfect opportunity to go back and figure out where I could be cleaning things up in her foundation. And today it was just simply cruising around. And she had a tough time, just cruising around. And it's something she's always had a tough time at. And that's what we worked on. And it fixed, we filled in these little gaps. And when I went off to try what didn't work yesterday, it worked.
Yeah.
So it's shifting the mindset when you have to go back and fix something, to not take it maybe not personally. I don't know if personally is the right word, but to not get over invested in the failure part of that, because it's actually liberating to go back and find the things that you missed.
Yeah.
Because it teaches you how to do things better the next time, or to how to keep continually improving. Like, it's not a straight shot to getting really good at this stuff. You're always going to push the limits too far and you're going to hit the wall and you're going to have to go back. And every time you go back, you're going to make it further the next time, and you're going to hit a wall again, and then you're going to have to come back. And it's just, I think that's part of developing in any skill is you have to make mistakes, and you have to you have to make mistakes. There's no way to make it. You can't do it perfectly. It's just, I don't know. It doesn't happen that way.
No, it really doesn't. One thing that's really helped me in moving through that kind of territory is to think of things, instead of being linear, to think of them as being cyclic. And a term I've been using is upward cycles of progress. So basically, anytime I'm presented with something which is familiar to me or feels like is something that I have met before, instead of going, oh gosh, here we go again, or I thought we were through this phase, or, getting those deflating feelings, I recognize it as an opportunity to renegotiate something from a whole different place. So it's not the same as it was before, because I have a different level of experience. I have different skills. I have different resources that are available to me. And it means that we can, things do represent. That's just the nature of things. And to be able to deal with them more compassionately and skillfully and easefully, to me, is a total win. I really actually appreciate those times now.
Yeah, they represent on a different level. So you might encounter the same, the same symptoms of whatever the horse expresses when something is too difficult or whatever. It represents itself, but on a different level.
Yeah, totally. And zooming out as well, if you can think about, you're only able to deal with what's presented to you within the capacity that you have at the time. So it makes sense that you won't be able to necessarily complete something or deal with something because there are different triggers and there are different, you have only what you're able to do within that moment, if that makes sense. And so things come up because there are layers that we peel off. I just don't think we are as simple, and I don't think our horses are as simple as it being black and white or a tick box of like, done, let's keep going. It's just not not that clear.
I mean, there's ways to communicate things in simple terms, but when people ask me something, it's like my first thought is, you have no idea how complicated it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And that really, the other thing that pollutes the water is our attachment to things happening within certain timeframes.
Yeah.
I mean, letting go of timeframes for me, and even moving outside of a competitive mindset where I think about, you know, I'm doing this and I want this result by then, and he's this age by now, which means this needs to be happening. I didn't even realize that I was operating from that place until I let go of it, which sounds kind of loopy, but you realize that you do have these self-imposed limitations about where you should be in reference
expectations.
To, expectations. And they really can cause so much angst when you are trying to do what is right for you and your horse in the moment. And ironically, that usually gets you, or does get you, to your destination, whatever that is, faster.
Yeah, the expectations, the thinking it needs to be a certain way, or thinking it needs to be different than what it is, and then fighting with that, or trying to make that happen quicker. Yeah, those things are things that it's figuring out how to let that go, how to work in the moment, work with the horse you have today, sort of thing. You know, there's nothing wrong with having a plan or having a process, but being flexible in your approach, being flexible in the day. If you go out and, you know, you have a completely different animal than you thought, you work with what you have, not with what you want to have.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know,
I have a bigger intention or vision for where things are going. It's not like we're totally aimless, but the attention is is on what presents in the moment. And since that's happened, since I've been really mindful about coming from that place, and this might sound a little bit Pollyanna-ish, but literally every session is rewarding on some level. Like there is so much gold that can be taken from the little wins that I have felt so much satisfaction from.
Yes.
That actually now it's become easier and easier to detach from this idea of creating a certain result, because you can get so many highs from within a certain session of just being able to make that connection or create a new level of understanding or easefulness about going about things. That is, to me, just the best.
Yeah. And that, I guess for me, that's been my lesson the last couple of weeks, with kind of blowing my horse up a little bit, but you know, like working, having we're going to go out and work on this today, you know, and just being so excited to have something new, and having that linear mindset rather than coming out and going, where are we at today? What, you know, what can we work on? What do we need to work on? Instead, I was going out and going, okay, we worked on this, so we need to practice this, so when we go back to our lesson, we don't look like idiots. So it's something, you know, I think if you quit learning, if you quit, like when I tell people I'm not brave, you know, and I'll have my little speech and they go, oh my gosh, you're so good at what you do, blah, blah, blah. And I'm afraid to ever think that way, because that's the moment you stop learning. And to have a mindset, you know, not so much that I'm not good enough, but to have more of a mindset of, you know, I'm not as good as I want to be. Like making this pretty good size error recently, you know, it's like, I got a lot more I need to be practicing, because I'm not as good as I'm envisioning myself to be one of these days. And, you know, when people want
to constant improvement.
Yes. And you have to make mistakes to get there. And, you know, that was you make mistakes, and your poor horse forgives you, and then you move on.
I think the tension that we need to negotiate from that place, because it is easy to get immobilized by the thought of what you don't know yet. And I know that I've, you know, that's happened in the past where all of a sudden this whole world opens up to you and you realize actually how little you do know. And you think, wow, okay. And for a while I did too little, because I was afraid of making mistakes that would mean something bigger to my horse, you know, coming from a really well-intentioned place. But I think that if you do stay reflective and you aren't egoic enough to, or you're able to drop your ego enough to the extent where you ask for help when you need it, you're checking back in, and you're seeing what's working and what isn't, then that gives you a really good framework of operations to proceed from.
Yeah, and I think the thing I'm the most proud of, thinking about what you just said, was I looked at that, that setback that we had yesterday where she didn't want to go up the hill. Instead of blaming her, I didn't blame myself either, but it was more of I took responsibility for it and didn't just go, oh, she's just being a brat, or she doesn't want to do what I want to do. She's not, instead of saying my horse isn't the one complying, it's been a shift of okay, we need to, it's a change in mindset of what's really happening. And it has nothing to do with her. She's a horse.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and as well, like it is that shift away from, oh, I'm a bad person or I'm a bad trainer, taking it really personally and using it as a reflection of a inadequacy of the self, and understanding it as a fault in the methodology or the training or the behavior, which is very, very different. You can have an anxious horse who is displaying characteristics or going about things in a way which really isn't compatible with us being able to have a safe relationship with them. But it doesn't mean they're a bad horse, like they're two totally different things. And I think that when you get to that place of being able to separate your intrinsic worth and their intrinsic worth out from their behavior, then you're in a place where you can really start to have some fun, because that's where, like you say, you get into those situations where maybe you made a mistake, and instead of letting your inner voice gang up on you and sort of removing yourself from the equation, it's like, okay, well, how are we going to go about fixing this? You ask yourself some really good questions which lead to the next destination point, which often I've found takes you to a whole new level of understanding and, just ways of negotiating things.
So taking mistakes as a way of improvement rather than defeat.
Yeah,
just change the mindset.
Feedback. When we're afraid to make mistakes, I think it's because we are afraid to be a failure. Like, I am a failure, rather than I have experienced something which hasn't perhaps gone the way that I wanted it to. And when you're able to, those two, it can be the same experience, but that way of looking at things is so different that it really decides how you move forward.
Yeah. Rather than saying I'm a failure, you say I have failed. Yeah. But I'm not, but it doesn't define you. It's just it's part of the deal. So
it's
I don't
necessary.
know.
It's totally necessary.
You have to do it.
Yeah. Really, if you're not getting it wrong, you're not doing enough probably, or you're playing within a safe zone, because you just can't know it all. There's just no way. Like, it's when you say that you have a process, so let's say you have the horse that you're presented with now, and you've been establishing some rapport and a level of communication through doing something that he hasn't done before, like using the tricks, and to make him a productive member of society. Is there a general way of going about things that you follow in order to be able to reintegrate horses that have had some trauma or have had some association with humans that has caused them to be typically anxious or upset?
I do have a process. Mm-hmm. I've learned more that it's how I feel. Yeah. Like, in the beginning, people would tell me I'm just being a chicken. I just need to get on with it. Like, I'm talented enough to just do it and I'll be fine. Basically, for a long time, I took that gut feeling, that anxiety, that fear, whatever it was. I took that as, I'm just being a chicken because everybody else told me I'm being a chicken. Mm-hmm. And I've learned that the way I feel working with a horse is very accurate. And whether it's my own insecurities or if it's if it's the horse's insecurities, if I dread getting on that horse, there's a reason. Or if I'm hesitating getting on that horse, there's a reason. And for me, I'm not brave, and I don't enjoy when horses buck, rear, or bolt. So I do whatever I can to avoid those things, and not to say I don't tiptoe around them, but I try to find as many ways as I can to get rid of that anxiety or that resistance before I put myself in a vulnerable spot on their back, and I think I might regret saying this, but, I think, well, because if I say it, then I'm going to go out and get hurt. But I think they say horse riding is one of the most dangerous sports there is. And I think it's dangerous because we ignore the signs and we put ourselves in places that we can avoid. Stuff happens, like a horse trips and falls and flips over on you. Like true freak accidents, you can't replicate. And the freak accidents of a horse bucking you off, that's not a freak accident because there was signs there before it happened, 99.9% of the time. And so I've learned to take that gut feeling of I'm not ready to get on this horse. And I really, I listen to it. And even if I feel like I don't know why I'm not ready to get on you, but I've kind of learned there's a reason, like I think you said it the other day, something about like actual danger versus, I don't remember how you said it, but it was like something that's like actually going on versus like a psych or a neuroticness or a some sort of psychosis where it's not like you think you're in danger, but you're not, versus you feel you're in danger and you sort of are, even if it's not obvious.
Yeah. True. Perceived.
It was, yes, true. Yeah, exactly. I listened to that and I went, oh, that makes sense. But it's the feeling I get. And there's there's some horses that I'll get on, and if they are squirrely, it doesn't bother me because it's the feeling I get behind it. Like that horse, that's all they have.
Yeah. It is so interesting though. And I know that you've mentioned that to me because Katy is one of the members of my Circle of Awesome that I pepper with questions on a daily basis when I'm training. And when I've been working with Dee, who, for those of you who might have just joined us now, he's my young horse that I've been in the process of starting. There are days where I really feel super confident that I can push the bar, like we can go places, let's get this moving. And there are other days where I'm tussling with this idea of what I should be doing, and I'm getting better and better at this. And the feeling that I'm having, like, because we might, in inverted commas, just be walking or working on some really super basic things. And I think, gosh, we should be further ahead than this. But the feeling he's giving me is one of anticipation and tension and anxiety. So actually paying attention to that is totally true and real for the moment. It's just that we commonly are so associated with our logical intelligence, with what it is that we're thinking about things, that we're disconnected from that feeling place. And I find that to be the most accurate radar of how to make decisions and decide what's best for the moment than anything.
Yeah. And I remember when you hadn't gotten on him yet. And I remember you saying, or at least the feeling that I got was you weren't ready to get on him yet. And you go, I know I need to get on him. But you couldn't do it. And I've been in that spot so many times, and it's like, okay, if I know I need to be getting on you, but I'm not ready, I figure out how to break that down. And I think we broke it down to, laying over his back, laying over, can you lay over one way? Can you lay over lengthwise? Can you get off it, get on and slide off? And, can you work from the fence, and it's, and those are ways of learning how to, like for me, if I feel like I'm being a chicken, which I'm not being a chicken, I actually feel something that's going on. Yeah. But it's being able to teach yourself the tools that builds your own confidence to get to where you want to go. And for you, I think I just kept giving you like, try this.
Yeah.
Come back to you. Okay, I did that.
And then broke it down. Yeah. I was a good student. I'm like, yeah.
And then one day you were on him, and I was like, yes, it worked.
Yeah, it's fabulous. And it builds confidence in both of us. I mean, I know I was having a conversation with Giles, my husband, yesterday, and it's like, both of you together, sometimes your horse will be ready for something you're not quite ready for. Sometimes you'll be ahead of the game, and you have to be on each other's time scale, like you have to do it together, and it doesn't really matter where everyone else is, because I figure at the end of the day, this is me riding my big young horse, and I have to be the one that gets on him every day. So regardless of what someone else is going to tell me, and I'm not referring to you, but, someone who perhaps is not as invested in the process or understanding of where it is that I'm at and what it is that I'm doing, they're not the one they're not the man in the arena. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
So you have to be okay with what it is that you're doing. And I think that all of us have had some version of that. And that's what I keep in mind. It's like, for me, I have to be the one that's here by myself doing this day in and day out. And so I need to make sure that this process is one that sets us both up for success and allows us to feel, you know, both me and my horse, that we're progressing in a way that's working for both of us.
Well, and that you stay safe too.
Yeah,
you
totally.
Horses are dangerous because we think they're unpredictable.
Yeah.
But they really are, like, they're predictable.
Yeah.
But, we skip too many steps, or we push them too far, or we
rush.
We don't recognize, like, that they're functioning with high anxiety all the time. So we perceive it as that's just them. That's their normal.
Or we don't recognize that we ourselves are functioning with high anxiety all of the time.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. The emotional contagion.
Yes. So so for me, I trust my gut more now than ever, and throwing out the idea that I'm just being a chicken. It's learned. I've had enough stuff happen. I haven't ever really been seriously hurt, but I've had enough stuff happen where I have a healthy respect for things. And I think you learn to pick up on, for me, I'm pretty sensitive. So I pick up on things pretty easily, like energy wise, feeling that something's not right. Yeah. It's usually not right. Yeah. And that, to me, if people struggle with that, is to learn how to be okay with that, and like you said the other day, if something, what did you call it? Like actual fear versus
real fear versus perceived fear.
Yes. Yeah. And figuring out, I thought I was just perceiving myself as to be a chicken, but it's real, there's real stuff there. So it's figuring out how to making sure that it's real versus not.
Yeah. And even if it's not, the feeling still registers. So you still have to be able to negotiate that in a way that's effective and, keeps you in flow.
Yeah. And your process is probably going to be the same.
Yeah.
Because, having an actual fear or having that actual anxiety means that you don't have the steps you need. Yeah. Having that perceived, anxiety is, I don't feel like I have the tools.
Yeah.
Both.
Even this is a whole conversation in and of itself, but the fear element is so interesting because, and the way that I describe it, I talked about this in Stable Hours in Joyride yesterday, was that if we can let go of the idea of emotions manifesting in a singular way. So, with fear, when we think about fear, we think about the very extreme version of fear, where we're immobilized or we're panicked or we're really, really afraid. But fear, like any other emotion, exists on a continuum. And at the lower end of the continuum, it's an alertness, or it's a feeling in your gut that something isn't quite right, or it's a uneasefulness or a discomfort around making a decision or moving forward in some way. That is actually your fear in free flow. And if we get more sensitized to what it is we're actually feeling, as opposed to, rationalizing our way out of something or talking ourselves out of something, then we're in a much better position to act on those earlier signals and find ourselves in a better feeling place where we're not in that immobilized or panic-stricken state. And that's still the same experience, but the message is much more subtle, and we're able to remedy it in a way that is less disruptive to both ourselves and our horses. And I think when it comes to working with horses as well, like what we've become associated to and conditioned to recognize is only anxiety and fear in its very extreme cases. And when we start to become sensitive to the smaller signals that they offer that tell us when something's not right or they're uncomfortable with something, then we can deal with it in that very early stage, and it doesn't become this big manifestation that's dangerous or problematic or overwhelming.
Exactly.
I think that's the skill of it for both us and for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Sort of renegotiating our relationship with emotions and better understanding them. Yeah, we've been talked out of our intuition a lot. I think this, again, I could have like 5 or 6 podcasts on the topic. I'm noticing that I'm leaning forward and I'm getting faster in my speech and starting to get louder, which
means getting excited
about my topic. So I need to get it back a bit. Yeah, so wowee. Well, if people want to find you or are interested in working together, where can they do so?
Well, I'm mostly on Facebook. So you can find me under Katy Negranti or Katy Negranti's Performance Horsemanship. I've got like a group, like kind of a public group, and then I've got like a business page, and then I'm working on like a website to offer more courses. So right now, the first one I've launched is the clicker training one, and it's just a condensed version of like I'm calling it clicker training 101, just the principles, the exercises to get you started with clicker stuff. You know, it's by no means near as in depth as like Georgia Bruce. You know, I really admire her course. She's done a great job with her stuff. So mine is just kind of what I do with it and kind of how I get started. And, you know, so that's the one I have right now. And I just launched it basically on Sunday. Today's Tuesday. That's where I'm at, and that's what I'm working on. I'll be doing like a groundwork course, a riding course, and then I'll probably do some mini courses on like spooking and separation anxiety, trailer loading, obstacles, you know, just kind of more of a whole rounded sort of program. But it just takes time to put those together, as you know.
Yeah. And I'll link to all those places in the show notes as well, so they can jump on my website and look at it there. So thank you so much. This has been a really great conversation.
Yes, it has. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. If you want to catch up with Katy, I will put all the links to do so on the show notes on my website, confidentrider.online, but you can find her by visiting Katy Negranti Performance Horsemanship on Facebook. That's KatyNegranti, or her website, katynegranti.com. And if you want to get in touch with me or check out my online program, you can do that on my website, confidentrider.online. Have a great rest of your day, and I'm looking forward to hanging out again in the next episode.